Welcome back to a third section of the SwiftUI course. My name is Meng, and today I want to show you how to create components and how to apply a bunch of visual effects. When you start styling your UI, you're going to notice very quickly that it's going to get massive. And the best way to go about this is to make sure that you create small components that are as reusable as possible. You can see here we have two main components. The first one is the card in the front and the second one is the card in the back. So what we're gonna do is command click the V stack for the first card in the back and then select extract subview like this. Now you need to make sure to name this before moving forward. We're gonna name this card view, enter. What this does is that it creates a reference to that component, and the component is created at the very bottom of the file. And you can indent this, Control I, and there you go. You can also do command click here and jump to definition to find where that component is. Also, notice that when you create big changes to your UI, sometimes the preview is going to pause. So make sure that you resume it when you're ready. And when it says succeeded, then you're good to go. All the changes made in the code is going to be reflected. So let's go back to the top and find the second component and create a subview from that. So extract subview. Wait a little bit and then name this one certificate view. So now you can see how much cleaner your code is with components. And I'm going to resume this and I want to show you that you can reuse these components. So I'm just gonna copy this and then paste it. Now we have three components. This one is at the very bottom because we're using a Z stack. So what we're gonna do is that we're gonna move this one using offset. I'm going to bring the offset and set it to 0, -20. So now you can see the bottom card and it's moving up a little bit. And what you're noticing also is that I didn't have to pass any prop to this component. I can just apply it just like a normal view, a normal stack, and add a bunch more modifiers if I want to. But sometimes it's not a good idea to overlap. So what we're gonna do is that we're gonna use this new one and we're gonna delete the one that applies to every single component. So I'm gonna go to the card view component and I don't need this one anymore. And here I can just copy and paste the offset on the second component. And the one in the back, it's going to be further up, -40. By doing this, your component is a lot more reusable because usually the offset can really scratch your head when you start using it because why is it moving up a little bit? The other thing that we did with our component is we set manually this frame size so that it fits the result that we want. But instead of doing this, which is not as reusable as it should be because we want to replicate the main card, therefore it should have exactly the same size as the main card. So the main card has 340, so we're gonna set it to 340 as well. With this done, we can simply set a scale effect. So I'm gonna show you how to do that. So I'm gonna go to the second card and I'm gonna place my modifiers correctly like this. Summon this to add another one and search for scale. So by default it's set to 3. 3 means 3 times, so that's a lot. We're gonna set it to 0.9. And I can just copy and paste to the other components. Okay, so now we see a little bit better. On the first card, what we can do is set to 95 and the bottom card 0.85. It might take a while for everything to settle after you apply, especially the opacity and the scale effect, but after a while it's gonna look like this. Great. Next, I want to show you how to add a rotation. So let's summon rotation, enter, and here instead of 90 degrees we're gonna set it to 15 and copy and paste to the other ones as well. This one is going to be 10 and this one is going to be 5. So we have this really nice rotation effect. Next, let's try a 3D rotation this time. I know I'm going pretty crazy, but I want to show you everything so that you can try it out yourself for your own design. Let's add a new property, search for 3D, and press enter. Here, we're gonna set the angle to 50. And again, it's starting to look good. I mean, 3D is awesome. So I'm going to set this for the others as well by doing copy and paste. And now you have this 3D effect that's just going to blow your mind. And especially when I'm going to show you how to do animation, at that point, you're going to be at the edge of your seat. But first, let's just moderate our values a little bit. Here we have a degree of 50. We're going to set 30, then 40 for the second one, and 50 is fine here. Finally, I want to show you how to do blending modes, because I think blending modes can be really useful, especially because in design tools they have been around for decades already. And it's only now that we're starting to use that in CSS, but now we're going to start using that a lot in SwiftUI. Let's start with this certificate, and I'm going to bring a modifier and search for blend mode, enter. By default it's going to be darken, and you can already see the effect that's going on. So darken does exactly that. It's like in the design tool. So let's apply that to the other ones as well. And now we have this. One thing I want to note is that this you can definitely play in your design tool before doing it in SwiftUI. But what is cool is that later on we're going to use animations, and that's what makes SwiftUI so unique compared to the design tool. In the design tool, you can see that you can go to the option for the blending mode and you can play with exactly the same values. So we have darken. Usually as designers we use overlay and soft light and hard light. Those are kind of the most popular ones. Sometimes designers will use multiply and darken, but again, you have to use something that fits with your design. That's the most important thing. So if we were to try, let's say, overlay or soft light, it can definitely look pretty good. So I'm gonna go back to Swift, and let's say for the certificate I'm going to remove the blending mode because I want to see the content. But for the background I can definitely use soft light, for example. Soft light can be very subtle, so overlay can definitely help make the blending a little bit better. But when you have such a soft background, such as white, it's not going to work really well. You're going to have to use hard light because we have a very light background. So you can see now we see some really interesting color with the hard light. So I'm going to apply that for the background card as well, and now we're starting to see some interesting results. When you're playing with shadows, it's important to have vibrancy, meaning that the colors should not be muted. For example, if you use multiply, oftentimes you're going to notice that the colors become more washed, and you actually want to avoid that unless you're going after that style specifically. But iOS is known to use really vibrant colors, so definitely keep the platform and the style in mind. Alright, So before we move on to animations, I want to add a bunch more UI stuff so that we can animate them at the same time. Using Blur, for example, is going to be a lot more interesting. First thing is the title, and then the illustration, and then we're going to add this bottom card right here. So let's start with the title. Right after the Z stack, I'm going to insert a text. And then here, I'm just gonna put certificates. I'm going to scroll to see where it is. It is in the middle. Now I'm going to embed this into a V stack so that I can push it to the top. So right after the text, I'm gonna insert a spacer. So now it appears right here. We can start customizing it. I'm gonna go to inspect. Because it's a title, I'm going to use large title, and I'm going to try to replicate the iOS 13 large titles, which is closest to heavy rather than bold. Because I want to add an illustration underneath and it has a very different alignment, I'm just going to use an H stack to align this text to the left and use the available space using a spacer. And after that, I'm going to put an image. So first of all, let's put this text into an H stack. And then let's add a spacer to push everything to the left. Then we're going to bring the image inside the V stack. So right before the second spacer, I'm gonna go to the images and bring illustration 5. Now all that's left is to add a bit of a padding. So I'm going to select the V stack right here and add a padding right after. And I'm going to write it in code because for some code it's faster to write it instead of using the UI. So dot padding parentheses. And you don't need to specify all because by default it applies to all corners. Great. So now let's take a look at the bottom bar. It has this background here with rounded corners. It has this text and it has this rectangle. So I'm gonna start with the content. You can use any text that you want. And I'm gonna go right after the V stack. I'm gonna start with the text. So text, and then put my text. Let's embed this into a V stack so that we can apply some sort of a container. Currently we don't see the container, so let's make it more visual by adding a background. So now it's blue, you can see what's going on. I'm gonna scroll a little bit, then I'm gonna add a spacer so that we can take more space. And now it should take the entire screen. We can add some padding as well. So again, using the VStack dot padding parentheses and some corner radius. The corner radius should be done after the background. Let's set it to 30. Let's look at the text. By default, it's already using the dynamic type called body, which is great because it's going to adjust, and I didn't need to set anything. And this is a good size for the main text of your design, and the size is actually 17. Notice that we have multiple lines of text, so we're gonna need to add a modifier called line limit, this one. And we can set it to 3 or any high number that you want. Currently, the line limit has a little bit of a bug from what I've experienced, so it's not always going to show the multi-lines version. So next, we're gonna draw this rectangle. In this case, this does not need to be an asset. You can simply use a rectangle shape. So I'm gonna teach you how to do that. The size is 60 by 6. So I'm gonna go back, and right before text, we're gonna summon a rectangle. So the rectangle is kind of like a V-stack, H-stack. It's a container, and you can just set the same properties. And in this case, we're gonna set the frame first as a modifier. We're gonna set it to 60 by 6. Then we can set the corner radius. So 3 should be fine. And it's gonna take a little bit of time to show. You can just press enter and it should work. And now we're gonna add opacity. Set it to 0.1. Again, the same way, you can press enter and it should be fine after. Now I wanna adjust the spacing a little bit, especially between these two elements. One way to do it is to go one by one on each of them and set a padding top. But what I can also do is set a spacing for my V-stack. So I can set the spacing, which is kind of like a gap in CSS Grid, and I can set it to, let's say, 20. And there you go. Now you're gonna have a spacing between every single element inside your stack. The other thing I wanna do is I wanna have more spacing on the left side and right side, but I don't want to add spacing from the top so that it's going to push this rectangle right here. So what you can do is actually add, multiple paddings. You don't need to have a single padding. So for example, I can do padding and then inside the parentheses put horizontal like this. So now it added an extra padding to the left and the right side. Then we're going to add a drop shadow. Let's set this one to 20. The drop shadow, by the way, needs to have a background color. If you don't have a background color, it's not going to apply the drop shadow. And now we can set it to white. And we just need to push it down. But before that, we actually need to set the spacing, the horizontal spacing, so that it fills the whole space. Usually you're going to use a spacer, but the spacer we're using it already for the V-stack, but nothing horizontally. So what we can do is set up a frame that's going to take all the available space for my container called the V-stack. So right before everything, like I said, the frame is good as the first property. So I'm gonna add a frame and I'm gonna use a trick. Instead of using a height, because we don't need to set the height at all, instead of using a fixed width, we can do min width like this. And this is camel case. And the min width, we can set it to 0, comma. Max width, we're gonna set it to infinity like this. So what is this going to do? It's going to have a minimum and maximum value. And the maximum value is going to have to take all available space. This is a good technique if you want to avoid using the spacer everywhere or having to create a new container, inside an H tag and using a spacer to fill the space. Let's auto indent all of this code. Control I. So now we have this V-stack, which is the title and illustration, and this one is the bottom card. We just need to move the bottom card using offset. So offset, and I'm just gonna use the Y position, set this value to, let's say, 600, and now it's pushed all the way down. So we have a lot of stuff. We have the title, illustration, the cards, and then we have our bottom card. Again, our code is looking a little bit heavy, so we're gonna create components for these. Let's command click and extract subview. Let's name this one title view. And for the big card, we're gonna name it card bottom view. So that's much cleaner. I'm gonna resume to make sure that my UI is working. And now I can decide to apply the blur effect. So on the card bottom, I'm gonna type dot blur and make sure to use the auto completion, especially when you're coding. So now we have this one and it's requiring the radius. So I'm gonna set it to, let's say, 20. So now you can see that it's applying the blur and it's really nice. I'm gonna do the same with the title view, so I can just copy and paste this and put it right here. Now everything is blurred, and as people are manipulating the cards, they can focus on this object. So I hope you're excited to bring this design to life. We're gonna use animations and it's gonna be a lot of fun. See you soon in the next session.